welcome to 2020, guys, and also a new decade. I have to admit that the clickbait that I used, it's a very small one, but what you just saw here, photography business trends in 2020, omit the S. There really is only one trend out there, and unless you've been living underneath a rock for the past decade or so, you would probably guess that it is all about social media photography. So how to shoot for your clients for their social media. And I assume by saying that all clients, businesses out there should have a presence on social media. Whatever platform that they choose works best for them. But how to shoot for social media in 2020 is basically the main goal of this video. Actually, it extends beyond that because I think social media right now and in the next foreseeable future is the main game. So if you're looking at any type of commercial photography, the content that you produce for them, for your clients, will eventually trickle down to be used on their social media. Even if it's a high-end ad, it'll find its way on their Facebook page. If it's an editorial shoot, it'll find their way on their Instagram page. So that's a pretty big deal. Whereas before, if you were shooting high-end ads, it might just end up on a billboard or a print ad or something like that. And social media may not be part of that. But now social media has got its fingers into every channel of their marketing strategy. And that's why it's so important. So if you're moving forward and you're not having dealt with social media as a shooter, still not too late to start, but you have to be in that game, especially in this year moving forward. So it's that important. My main client for social is Audi in Hong Kong. And before you think that, you're in Hong Kong, it's probably different over there. It's not. Social media and the proper way to use social media is the same across the world, I believe. Some people don't use it correctly, but that's a different story. But I think the main goal of social is basically just to connect people and interests. That is a global, constant thing. So I'm here to share with you 3 things that I've learned in the past few years shooting for social media for my clients. The first one is just what kind of content are they looking for, or if they're not sure, what kind of content works. And as a photographer, you may not know because you are usually subject to the guidance from their marketing teams or the art director if there's an agency involved. I do not work with an agency, so I work directly with my clients. And sometimes they know their products very well, but they may not know how best to present them, and that falls onto me. So I had to figure out a way that to make content that works for their brand. And branding is actually the key word here because I do not believe that you should be pushing their actual products or service on social media. I think that comes later in the game if they have a sales team. I think that on social media it's most important to show the brand story behind the company and shoot towards that goal in mind. And when you think about branding is mainly about emotions and feelings. You're creating some sort of emotion that if you buy this product or service, you will feel this way. It works really well for fashion, it works for automotive, especially for goods, because you can create objects of desirability that way to make them feel a certain way when they purchase that product. So what kind of imagery works on social media? I think the trend now is shifting. Whereas it used to be a lot of highly produced ad type of images out there, I don't think that actually works very well because it's not authentic enough and genuine enough for people to trust. And when your platforms entire purpose is to connect people and to trust one another. If you throw a fancy over photoshopped image on there on the feed, people will see right through it, because as consumers, we already know that a billboard that you see of a highly produced, very polished and refined image looks great, but we know it's photoshopped. It's been retouched to hell. And we accept it because somehow we just expect a billboard to look pristine. But how much do we actually believe it to be true? On one sense, you can say, well, the client is trying to show their product and service in the best light, and that's true. It's satisfying that objective. But on the other flip side, how trustworthy is that ad? When I go buy that burger, is it going to look like that, from the billboard? Well, as we know, probably not. So on social media, it's an entirely different ballgame, because it's built around this trust thing. So the images have to be trustworthy, and how to do that is to just shoot as authentically as possible. But this works in your favor as a photographer, because you don't have to spend that extra time and most likely money to get that perfect image that you would do for a billboard. You can actually loosen up a little bit and compromise a bit on the quality to A, get it done in time, and B, make it look more real, which is actually the most important thing. So there's going to be shifts here and there to get that balance, and it really depends on who your clients are. Like my clients are a global car brand, and they're on the luxury car brand side, so they have a pretty high aesthetic value on their imagery already, and I have to keep that standard. I can't drop below that just because it looks more real. I still have to be there. If there's a spectrum, I'm just more on the realistic side versus the high-end pristine side. So I'm still there. I have to make sure of that, but I have to keep it in an efficient way so that I can keep churning out these images over and over again. Because as you know, these are contract deals for social. We all know that you cannot turn around or grow social media overnight. It's a multi-month, at the very quickest, thing to get the ball rolling and to keep growing that way. So these productions have to keep going, which is a good thing, because shooting under contract is steady money. It's probably the closest thing you can get to a full-time job while as a freelancer, because the paychecks are steady. Point 2, this really depends on where you are at in your career. When I say that I'm scaling down my production size, it may mean that you're scaling up on your end. I'll put that into more practical terms. I will try my best to pack 2 bags or cases, excluding my light stands and my tripod, when I go shoot for social media. Whereas before, in my case, I could be packing a truckload full of equipment. That includes rental gears as well, to a shoot, because you just never know. But in social media's case, I have to force myself to keep it mobile, efficient, and shooting with a specific set of equipment that's easy to use and can shoot quickly. And we can get to that in the third point, because that's what the equipment is going to be talked about. But in this section, the second part, it's about the actual production, the pre-production and the post-production. So for pre-pro, where we're just planning for the shoots, we will try our best to shoot at a certain date, and the only thing that we cannot control is the weather, as you well know. And in a place where I live in Hong Kong, where the weather is always unpredictable, and you cannot know for sure until maybe the day or two before the actual shooting day, we have to approach the shoot hoping for a certain type of weather, but also as a contingency still able to pull it off if the opposite weather shows up that day. It will be rare for us to actually change the shooting day because we can't afford to do so because we have a whole schedule of shoots lined up. So if you cancel one day or postpone it to another one, we start falling behind that schedule. And so that's what the lighting is for. If we plan on a sunny day, for example, to use natural light and minimal fill, uh, that's great. But if it turns out to be rainy or cloudy, we have to completely flip our minds at the last moment and bring out more lights, for example, just to kind of get that shot, even though it's going to be a completely different shot. So that's a good point, because now I'm talking about the creativity as well. We have to be loose enough to accept different looks, because obviously a sunny day look and a rainy day look is very different. But if you step back and look at the big picture of supplying a feeling of branding to your client, either way can work. You just have to be prepared to go either way, and that's my point. And also, in terms of the efficiency of packing such minimal equipment, is because you have to move fast. You have to shoot in quantity, and the smaller number of equipment that you have, the quicker you can move. And whether or not you use assistants or not, I highly suggest assistants are crucial, because they just double the manpower than if you're working alone. Like, the math is simple. If you use more than one assistant, even better. But I generally just use one if I can, and that makes the world of difference already. In terms of planning, we might be thinking about a location to shoot. Some locations charge money, depending where you are in the world. Some are free, I'm sure, but where I am, pretty much every square inch of the city is managed by someone, and they will be seeking for some sort of compensation, one way or another. So maybe you can work with some other establishments, other venues, who can see that, especially if you're working for a global brand, that's got some leverage, and you can use that leverage to collaborate with another venue, like a restaurant or a bar, and say, hey, can we shoot in your bar in exchange for some, just, no money exchange type of thing. We can shoot here, and then we'll tag you on our client's page when they come time to post. That could work as well. But locations have to fit the budget, which is not, astronomical. But if we can't find a location, we have to also be loose enough to work with another location. And it should usually work. Because if you base your entire shoot on the quality of one location, then you might have your priorities a bit wrong that way. A good location is great to have, but if you switch it, doesn't mean your entire shoot falls apart. Sometimes it's a shame, but I won't say it's a complete disaster if you can't get a specific location. Okay, post-production is kept at a minimal compared to advertising. So you should be finding a retoucher if you're not doing your own retouching, and I strongly suggest using a retoucher, because you don't have time to do retouching after a shoot. You're planning for the next one right away. So those images that you just shot, it's best that you leave it to someone else who's better than you at Photoshop. And I don't think there are many photographers out there who can claim that they are complete Photoshop experts, because there are people out there who spend their entire lives learning to be masters of Photoshop. So they're gonna be better than you no matter what. If budget's really tight, then maybe do your own retouching, but still, I strongly don't recommend that. I suggest you find a good retoucher to work with. That could be a separate video altogether. Point 3. Now we're talking about the gear. And if you follow me on my channel in the years to come, it's a new channel at this point, but you'll probably notice, and I've said this to myself, I'm not going to get too heavy into the gear. There's just Instagram, YouTube, everywhere about photography on social is just oversaturated with equipment talk, and you don't need another person to talk about it. So I told myself that I'm going to talk more about the practical sides of photography and more the creative side of photography. But I have to mention sometimes about the gear. And in this case, I should, because I've talked about all the other stuff about social media shooting already. And for equipment, I generally switch around a little bit, but it generally is kept to a, I wouldn't say basic, but I would just say a decent mirrorless camera, and which has more than enough megapixels for social media. Something that can do video as well would be great, because you just need one camera that can do both. But you may already guess that megapixels means nothing in social media, based on the resolution of the posts that are done in almost every platform. 2048 on the long side is probably the limit, and that's like what, not even 20 megapixels. So I'm sure like every current modern camera can do that, and even down to lenses, you don't need the best lens out there. All that technical stuff is really falls second place to the actual story and content that you're creating. That's much more important than the gear itself. But if you go back to the point 2 that I made about being efficient, yes, there are certain things that can help you be more efficient in choosing your right gear. So the mirrorless thing is one good thing, because it keeps the camera smaller than a DSLR. Something that can shoot video, like I said. Tripods, light tripods would be great. I use a Gitzo. Right now I'm shooting with an EOS R, which is fine, but I also have an M5 here, which also works as well, even though it doesn't do 4K. And lenses, no big deal. I would say, one good story is that I've shown the North American creative directive for a high-end car brand, like a luxury car brand, something that I shot in my portfolio. And at the time, in my portfolio, there was only one image that was shot with this M5, and just turned out it was his favorite image in my entire book. So like, that's a really good testament to show you that the equipment really doesn't matter too much. Every other image in my book at the time was shot with medium format, and he didn't care. And he shouldn't care. He looks at the image, and it just so happened for that one shoot that I didn't have medium format to choose from. I had that camera, and that's all I had. So the images, whatever subtle differences that you see in the image quality versus a high-end phase 1 with 150 megapixels, is so negligible that a client with very discerning taste doesn't even care. So that alone should say that maybe these high-end cameras are just overkill. I'm sure someone will come out and say that there's a justification for everything. And yes, when you think about it scientifically or mathematically, yes, those cameras are better. But in reality, especially from a practical situation, talking about actual work for a professional photographer. So when your friends who are retired doctors and lawyers who have the money and they can go out and buy an Alpa and a phase back and Hasselblads and whatnot, sure, but that's to satisfy their own needs, and I'm sure they have a very different set of needs than you as a working pro. So for lighting, I'm right now renting at the moment, because I really like the Profoto B10 Pluses. They're decent power compared to power that I'm used to, but most importantly, they fit in the bag. 2 of them, and they work really well, and they're easy to use, and they connect to an app or even to your camera, I believe. I haven't used that part yet, but definitely to your iPhone if you have one. And every assistant can pick it up, even someone who doesn't know Profoto, they can pick that up like in 5 minutes. So really good system. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't even own one, but it's one that I prefer to use at the moment. Coming from someone who's shot Broncolor most of my career, this is just a different type of lighting setup for a very different use, even though I still love my bronze stuff. So That's pretty much simple. I don't overcomplicate my lighting. I just use lighting to help make things look more natural in case the dynamic range isn't there. Which is a good point. If you're talking about DR, dynamic range, from a practical real life situation, most of the cameras out there have decent enough dynamic range unless you're shooting a really high contrast scene and your camera it's not one of the top 5 in dynamic range, then you might run into some issues. But I think again, a skilled retoucher can find a way to extract that information. But in a very general sense, most cameras' dynamic ranges are pretty good nowadays, and if the scene that you're shooting isn't super high contrast, and I'm talking like a sun in your lens type of contrast, then you should be okay. The lighting just comes in to help fill in when your extreme contrast is just too much. If you're shooting at night, obviously you just need more lighting, and the 2 Profoto B10 pluses that I use normally won't be enough. You need double that at least just to get enough lighting. The darker place that you're shooting, just the more lighting you need. That's normal. It'll come to a tipping point where you just say it's not worth shooting in some places for social media, right? Natural light works best. Just the more natural ambient light out there works better in general. Because again, it's one small thing that doesn't dictate the entire look of the shoot. If you take that away, can you still shoot? You should still be able to shoot. Same goes for the camera. If you take out if you remove a certain lens from the formula, does that mean you're useless as a photographer? No, it shouldn't mean that. You should still be able to get a shot. I've been telling assistants that I work with that they should be able to pick up any camera, and be able to shoot a good shot, regardless. I mean, it was not too long ago when we were shooting film without all these fancy features. Just shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And there were many photographers making amazing images that way, so that hasn't changed. All this fancy feature sets now that you see are actually a hindrance, in my opinion, to helping you become a good photographer. That's another video. If you'd like to see that video, let me know down below, okay? So I hope these 3 tips today have helped you so much, and again, happy 2020, and I hope to see you soon.